So, welcome to our latest edition of Coaching Outdoors, and we've got a little bit of a different plan in store for you today. What we've got is a bit of a two-parter. So the first part is recorded at the beginning of March, and then the second part is recorded later in the year. And we've got our first guest from America, Jen Wills, and we're absolutely delighted she's joining us from the East Coast. And it would be great if you could just introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Wills, and I have a coaching firm, J. Wills Coaching. I'm in Virginia on the East Coast, as you mentioned, and I'm an outdoor coach. I help people find their best selves using the power of nature, which I just feel very strongly about. We'll get into, of course. I was an attorney for the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency for 16 years before I decided to start a new career as a coach. But I have also a sustainability degree, and this kind of thread of being an advocate for the environment and nature has been something that I've been passionate about for my whole life.
Wow, that's a really fascinating background, and we found that everyone we've spoken to, all the different coaches we've spoken to, have come to us from such different walks of life and different backgrounds, different careers, different qualifications. But what we do like to do right at the very start is ask all of the people we speak to, just if you can think about or remember your earliest memory of being outdoors and what it is about the outdoors that you love so much.
Yeah, well, my earliest is probably around the age of 5. And when I was 5 years old, we lived in a house that had woods. It had a field, then a creek, then woods. And my friends and I, my sister, we would be out there all the time. We were in that creek all day, every day, and we would catch all the critters and we would catch all the bugs. And it was just this, I would say it was that sense of freedom that we had. There weren't adults kind of hanging around us. I'm sure they were somewhere, but we didn't know where they were. They weren't hanging around us. We were free. There was also this sense of adventure. We would make up stories about who lived in the woods and the giant snapping turtle that lived in the creek. And then there was discovery. You know, every rock we turned over was something new. There was something that we'd never seen before, or it was in a new situation we hadn't been in before. And so those memories have stuck with me.
And it's always a real pleasure to ask people about their earliest memory. For those of you who are watching kind of online, you'll really see Jennifer's face, like she totally lit up, and it's always the smiles that we get from everyone who we're talking to. It's always a real pleasure to kind of get that insight into their childhood. But then taking it forwards, I mean, you mentioned kind of your initial kind of career in law. So then kind of coaching wise, and this is partly why it's a real delight to have you on. You're kind of at the beginning of your coaching kind of journey, and you've just started kind of venturing out into nature. This is what we really want to be honing in on during this kind of conversation today, and then a bit of a reflection piece looking back when we talk to you next time, is ultimately kind of, you know, this stepping into nature. It's all very new. So kind of it would be great just to have a little bit more of your coaching backstory, and then kind of linking it to what is persuaded, convinced, encouraged you to kind of step outside with your clients.
Sure. When I was at the EPA and I was an attorney, there were a number of years where I knew I wasn't in the right place. I wasn't really using my strengths the way that I felt I could make a greater difference. So while I was advocating for the environment, I didn't feel like I could see the people I was helping. So when I got the chance to help coach professionals through career transitions, particularly those who wanted to get into sustainability roles, I said, yeah, I'm going to do that. And I loved it. I was working with individuals and empowering them and helping them feel like they could go out and make a greater difference in the world. And I was doing that at the same time as an attorney. And then finally, I decided if I was going to make coaching a career, I needed to stop doing the other thing, and I needed to just do coaching. So I did that. I left that 2 years ago almost. And then I started realizing, I need formal training. So I went to an ICF accredited program through George Mason University, and it's focused on well-being, but it's about all the ICF, pieces. And when I was there, someone mentioned walking coaching. That's a thing. And then I started looking into it a little bit more, and somebody said, well, I know somebody who does hiking coaching out in Oregon. Oh my gosh, that's it. I mean, I didn't even have to think about it. I mean, I've had to think about it since. How do I make this work? But the idea, the concept of taking people outdoors for coaching, just completely, I connected with that idea right away.
So in terms of the clients that you are working with, either face-to-face or in groups or virtually, how do you work with your clients? What kind of clients do you have, and how do you integrate that being outdoors into your coaching practice, especially as it's sort of quite new within your coaching practice?
Yes. So, I feel like every client I have, I learn something new about coaching and coaching practice. What I've done mostly is I've coached people on the phone while we're outdoors. So I'll be on the phone, they'll be on the phone. And part of that is because most of my clients don't live in my town. Part of it is COVID, but most of it is because most of my clients don't live here. They're all across the US. So we'll be on the phone together. So they'll be in their outdoor space. I'll be here. And we'll walk together. And what I found, that sounds strange maybe to some, but what I've found is I really enjoy it because I have a stronger sense of intuition when I am doing it that way, rather than like side by side or with that person. And I don't know what it is. It's just, I will have that feeling out in the woods, and I'll just stop and kind of think about it and mention what I'm feeling to the client and see if that resonates with them. And it's really neat to see what comes back. I've also found that, and I don't know if this would be the same if they were with me, but my clients are having these experiences where they're seeing things where they are that I can't see. And it is so neat because they'll say, I just saw these 2 cardinals or redbirds. They just came out of the fog. And I didn't see them, but I can hear their excitement and the meaning of that in their voices. So I really enjoyed doing that. I have taken people out to these woods face to face. And what I've found, again, it's always a learning experience. Walking one in front of the other is kind of awkward. So ideally we'll walk side by side. There was another time where I decided I was being coached, and I asked someone if they would, coach me outdoors. So I decided I'm going to do this walk. I get on this busy road. I could not focus for the life of me on anything. There were just cars passing. So, another experience, another learning is let's find a quiet space to do our outdoor coaching. Oh, and I also have this framework that I've developed, and I would love to tell you about it. I call it nature roaming. And the story there, which I love to share, is that last spring, my son, who was 6, is now 7, he discovered the woods behind our house for the first time. Okay, I don't know what took so long, but great. You're out there. He was exploring. He was building forts. And he came back after one day just being out there, and he says, hey, you know what I've been doing? I've been nature roaming. I said, oh my gosh, I've been trying to think of a name for what I do. Can I use that? He said, sure. So I have nature roaming, and there's 3 parts: roam, connect, grow. And it's really simple. It's a really simple thing, but I love it. And I've done this with groups in person. And so I haven't done it really with individuals yet. I guess that's next on my list of things to experience. But with groups, I'll take them out, and the roam part is being quiet with your intention out in the woods, essentially, just being there and looking around and seeing what is coming back to you from the woods. And then when we connect, I bring everyone to journal. We stop at a point where I've just, kind of chosen ahead of time, and they journal. And so they're kind of connecting the dots between what they've experienced in the woods and that intention that they had. And then I bring them together as a group. And this is something that they love, is just sharing within the group and connecting in that way. And then the growth piece is on the way out. What is that learning you're going to take with you after you leave the woods, after you leave this experience, so that you continue to grow? And so roam, connect, grow.
Love that. Absolutely love that.
Thanks.
Brilliant.
roam, connect, grow. And yeah, that was definitely something that when we touch base in a few months' time, we'll be kind of checking on and checking in and see how
Yes.
it has evolved individually and in groups. So, oh, you love it when you get a bit of inspiration from your 7-year-old. Imagination is amazing. So this is when we're going to ask, okay, you've touched on a couple of the challenges that you've kind of faced as learnings and worked around them. And it would just be really kind of you're able to share any more challenges you face. And it's often the kind of the tricky situations that we get ourselves into. They are our greatest learning points. And that's what our listeners kind of love, is to hear from like the examples of others. So it would be really kind of you able to kind of just share what the biggest challenges have been so far for you, and then ultimately how have you overcome them, or how you are overcoming if it's still going on.
Sure. One of them is making sure that I have the conversation ahead of time with the client about what the outdoor experience could be for them. So I'll give you an example. I go out into the woods. I don't think twice about it, right? But some people, it's not their place where they normally would go. I take a client, it was a friend, she's in another city, and she goes to a park, and so okay, you go to your park. But when she gets there, she says, we're on the phone, I've never been here alone before. I usually come with my husband or friends. And she tells me the story of why she doesn't go there. She was worried about, people, dangerous people. I thought, oh my gosh, I did not even think to have this conversation beforehand. And then she goes on to say, and it's really foggy. I can barely see a thing. What is going to happen on this call? And it was amazing what happened on that call. She got outside of her comfort zone. We were able to use the fog as a metaphor for some barriers that she was having around her business and like the way she viewed herself. But just having that conversation ahead of time about what makes you feel safe, where would be a safe space to go would be a good conversation to have, I learned. Another, and I don't know if that's a challenge, a challenge. Anyway, I'll throw it in the challenge bucket. The other challenge that I've discovered is educating or even just describing what outdoor coaching is. So I feel like for the people that I work with, they tend to have not had a coach before. So I'm describing what coaching is. And then to add on to that, outdoor coaching, right? So it's outdoor coaching, and sometimes people, what does that mean? And so educating people on that is a challenge that I feel like this is why I just love having connected with you all in this podcast. The fact that it exists, I think it's going to help overcome that challenge, because we need to get the word out, right? It's gonna, as a group, all of us coaches who are doing this should get the word out, and more coaches should do it, and more people should want to do this. An example that I have for this is I set up a Google alert for outdoor coach or outdoor coaching. And what I get back from that Google alert are articles on golfing. So it's not really a well-known concept, I would say.
Oh, it's brilliant to hear you mentioning those things, because I mean, these are sort of the things that I think a lot of people listening will resonate with. And this idea of, and this is exactly why Anna Marie and I connected in the first place, was because we were both outdoor coaches, and we knew a couple of people, but we were looking for somebody to connect with and start to collaborate with, and trying to bring this kind of understanding, and as you said, the education piece around what does being coached outdoors mean, how does it differ, that sort of thing. And what you mentioned there about the Google search made me laugh, because I did some research last year, and I was researching journal articles, anything I could find that would bring me any kind of research that had been done into coaching outdoors, and all I got was sports-based coaching. And I was trying to figure out how to make my search terms work that basically removed every sports term I could find and was just talking about business coaching or whatever. So you're absolutely right, it's spreading the word. And we were talking just before we actually started recording, weren't we, about the fact that you're in America, and it would be really great, actually, from our point of view, for our listeners, our European listeners and our British listeners, but also we're hoping this is going to go much further afield than that. We're hopefully speaking to another somebody else based in America later on in the series. It would be great to hear about outdoor coaching in America, and what kind of considerations you think that might be specific to being in that American coaching market and having an American coaching practice that might be similar or different to us in Europe? What are the considerations for you over there?
So I will be really interested in hearing your other US based coach on this. From, you know, my kind of newish coaching practice, what I found is the fact that you're outdoors. Okay, you all may or may not know that the United States is a very litigious place. Like, take people to court, and being a lawyer, I have that kind of in the back of my brain all the time. And so when you go outside, there's now a new level of risk than just sitting in your house. And so a couple of things to think about are, and maybe this is the same there, I'm not sure, having insurance coverage that covers the dangers, the risks associated with being outdoors. So I have professional liability for just regular coaching, but going outdoors is a whole other, you know, set of potential risks, right? Like fall and hurt yourself or whatever. And so there's the coverage. There's also then the waiver or the agreement provisions that are tied to that risk too. Like telling people, this kind of goes to the conversation to have beforehand. What are some of the potential risks that you might want to, you know, be aware of? And then the other that I've discovered is permits. So I haven't taken out paid groups into our national forests or national parks, but to do that, you need a commercial use permit. And so there's a whole application process and deadlines for that. And so that is kind of on my longer term. We'll see if I get to that by September. For now, I just come here. And when I'm on the phone and they're in their place, I don't think I need a permit. And then the last is kind of the different, you know, the culture, the outdoor culture across the United States varies. And this is a very broad generalization, but you know, you have someone coming from Colorado. Like Colorado, everybody's outdoors. Like that's why people go to Colorado, as far as I know. The Western United States are more, they just have more of an outdoor culture. And, you know, maybe the Northeast as well. I'm on the East Coast, mid-Atlantic. There's a little bit less of that. There are pockets. And so finding the people who are more comfortable and willing to give it a try is a little bit, I don't know if it's harder because I haven't tried out there either, but probably different. Yeah, I don't know. Is that kind of what you were thinking there?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And very much it was just kind of opening it up. It's still it's kind of it's ironic because we've been speaking to some people who've been kind of working outdoors for, you know, 20, 30 years. And, you know, it has been a thing. It's not like we're creating something new here. They're actually there. It's so disparate and it's come from so many different disciplines. I mean, coaching in itself is a total mongrel, is the way that I describe it. And then actually the whole outdoor space as well. And then what that kind of brings and how business perceives it and where should work be done, inverted commas, sat down, attached to a computer. So in a way, we're kind of pulling things together from so many different areas, kind of challenging a lot of the cultural kind of status quo around work, as opposed to a leisure pursuit, because in the past, you know, the outdoor space has just been more deemed as leisure. So there's just so many different beliefs and values that we're kind of hopefully challenging and unpicking and encouraging others to do the same. And yes, around the world, we all have different kind of cultures, and what impact does that have? So no, I'm really interested to see how we kind of spread into America and connect with more coaches. And clearly, if you are an American coach listening in, feel free to reach out. We would love to hear from you. And ultimately, this podcast is all about showcasing the work of practitioners and experts around the world and sharing best practice, sharing resources. And that kind of brings me on to the next point before we kind of wrap up for our time together today, is in your journey so far, what specific resources have you found really useful in supporting your growth in this area?
What I really like to do is read about the healing power of nature, or even beyond healing, how nature and being outdoors improves your well-being, it improves your mental health and your physical health, and just all of those things together outdoors. And so, you know, your creativity increases, all the things. And so those are the articles that I really like to read about. And when you were talking earlier about more research in this area, I would love to have more research in this area and read and learn about that. I also like reading about the trends, particularly, I guess over here, there's more of an acceptance of taking activities that traditionally been indoors, taking those outdoors. And so yoga obviously is very, I don't know, obviously if that's obvious to you. But out here, it's more accepted now. You do yoga outside, of course. And I read about a bill that was passed that would provide funding to have outdoor therapy for veterans. And so, just like one more thing, and I feel like there is this trend and there is this movement in that direction of taking people and activities outdoors. So I like to seek those articles out too.
That's really great.
If and over the next 6 months, if you stumble across anything specific, it would be fab if you could just capture it, and then we can link it into the website when we release your interview towards the back half of the year, because we've got a resources page on there that we're hoping to populate.
Sure. Definitely.
That's exactly what I was going to say as well. We think so symbiotically, the two of us now. So what I'd like to do is wrap up for today and say thank you very much for joining us, Jen, and just to say that your journey so far is just really inspirational, and I know it will be inspirational to some of our listeners, because we've had quite a lot of people who are thinking about taking their coaching practice outdoors, and have contacted us saying, I'd love to hear more from people who have just started, that sort of thing. So it's really great for us to be able to showcase someone like yourself who you're early-ish on your journey, both as a coach and an outdoor coach. And as we said, we'll look forward to the second part of this interview, where you will see us shortly, a little bit later in the year, and we'll be able to ask you a bit more about your journey and what has changed and what has evolved over the next few months. So for today, Jen, thank you very much for joining us, and we will see you again shortly.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me.
What I'm really curious about is where we're all going to be, because at the moment I'm it's a bit grey, Wiltshire. Alex, it's looking stunning. You're totally trumping. It's just beauty's looking sparkly for the listeners who aren't watching. And then Jennifer, it's sunny where you are as well, in these beautiful woods. So I'm feeling, it's been gorgeous to look at, but I'm the one in my down jacket trying to keep warm today.
Hopefully we'll all be warm.
Well, I must admit, September time in Scotland, on the west coast of Scotland, is stunning. It's like an Indian summer. So hopefully it'll be a bit like this, but I might not be wearing a jumper. So it's a little chilly here, but it is sunny. So yeah, hopefully it'll be just as sunny, but maybe a little bit warmer as well. So yes, and I guess the east coast of America, you probably have similar sort of weather as well. So fingers crossed for us all to have some nice sunny weather.
Absolutely.
So welcome back. It is now the end of October. We're all in slightly different locations. Alex hasn't quite got the stunning backdrop that she had last time, and it definitely looks a little bit different behind Jen as well. And I've not been able to venture outside today. So it's been 6 months since we connected, and I've been so excited about catching up with Jen and learning about what she has been up to during that period of time. So yeah, we've got a few questions just as a bit of a check-in as to what you've been up to, how your business has moved forwards, and it sounds as if there's been a bit of a shift as well at the heart of your business around the language that you're using. So just kind of kick-starting with that, what have you noticed specifically, and where is that change come from?
Yeah, so and this is really, it's about just the way I think about it, the way I describe what I'm doing. And I'm sure so many of your podcast interviewees have had this similar language, but I was thinking myself before as outdoor coach or as incorporating nature into coaching, but where I've really come around to is it is about partnering with nature. And I know coaches will understand that. It just took me a while of really thinking about it and saying, no, it's not like nature just is there. Nature is a part of this whole process, and so it's the partnering with nature that I would say. And then there's the outdoor piece, right? So outdoors, but also thinking more about it as nature coaching. I know this is Outdoor Coaching Podcast, and so there's you can have nature. I think you can have a nature experience indoors if you can't get outdoors? I mean, we were just talking about how dark it is where you are, Alex, in the winter, and maybe there aren't times that you can get outside into nature, but are there ways of bringing nature indoors? So those are kind of the bigger picture things that I've been thinking about.
And what you say actually is it echoes some of the conversations we've had with our other guests actually. So we've had quite a few guests who've said, they originally started talking about nature being their office, or they go into nature into the outdoors to coach, and they've had that same sort of almost realization. Actually, it's co-partnering. We are nature. We are part of nature. We are not with nature. We are nature. And how does that change then, like you said, your language and how you interact with your clients and with the world around you? And I love that idea as well about bringing nature indoors if you can't go outdoors. So you just mentioned, I'm in northwest Scotland, so it's getting dark very early now. And so I personally try to fill my house full of plants and things that look like water, anything that I can bring the outdoors indoors to help to kind of, and have, everything near windows. I always try and be near the windows. So yeah, it's great to hear that kind of evolution of your thought process and of your practice around, just the language that's used. One thing we spoke about last time was this wonderful suggestion that your son gave you about what you call your kind of, your practice and your framework. And I think it was absolutely wonderful that you said that your son described his experiences outside in the woods behind your house as nature roaming. How has that framework evolved, and how are you still using those three areas of so it was roam, connect, and grow, if I remember right? Yeah. So how has that evolved, and how are you using that now?
So I'm still using that, and I love it because it sets out kind of the framework. So I will say I do typically like a regular coaching conversation without necessarily using that framework. But when I use the framework, what it is the roam piece I've modified that a little bit, because I used to think about it as focusing on an intention while you walk in nature and kind of being present. And what I realized is actually the focus, by focusing too hard, it actually negates the benefits that you're getting, and kind of has the opposite effect. So I started thinking about that as letting that intention go, actually, and then you have the benefits of nature, having that unfocused time for your brain, and that's where the creativity comes in and your ideas come in. And so kind of again, just a change in the language and the way I describe it, which really can have a big impact. The other thing is I've had some clients that they don't really want to come with their own intention or something, or maybe they kind of get stuck a little bit, and so they've been looking for intention cards, so a card with a word on it that can be that thing that triggers some ideas for them. And so having that ready with my groups out in nature is also something that I've modified a little bit. The connect piece is still connecting with each other. If it's a group, connecting the ideas in nature with the intention and like what's around. So that's similar. And then the grow is also, you're out in nature, you've had this experience, but that's not the end of it. It's coaching in general. Like you keep growing and you keep coming back to those ideas that you had and the thoughts that you had, and how they relate now that you're back, in your house or at work. And so I have everybody journal during the connection part, and what I'm thinking is they need to come back and look at that journal, right? It's reflection. So I had a client, just an example here because of how to carry it forward. She said she was out on a nature run with me, and she said she was thinking about how to approach problems with a hopeful mindset. And she was thinking about like how nice it is to have this time together, this time alone and together, but to think, and how they don't really have that as a family anymore because there's all the busyness happening. So she was thinking about what she can do when she goes back to kind of put boundaries around that busyness. Just some other examples, if that's okay. I feel like it's been so fun to with the metaphors, of course, are still very powerful always. You all know this, but I've had a couple I wanted to share. So I had a client, she was talking about her new business endeavor, and she was just feeling a little uncomfortable and trying to, get into it, and she sees a fish jump out of the water, which reminded her of being a fish out of water. And even though it wasn't, this huge learning or anything, it still, as we all know, putting words on something kind of helps feel more comfortable with it. I also have had, and this I love, I've had a client now who reminded me that she has done this with me in every season. So all 4 seasons. And she was talking about what she's learned across these seasons. And I wanted to say, again, with the metaphors, growth, reemergence, and of course in the fall, which is now, you can see the leaves, shedding of things that aren't serving her, like the leaves are falling from the trees. That one, it was really fun when she was telling me about all of those and kind of putting them together. And then another metaphor is the human-made objects, which I hadn't really thought about this, but I had an experience this spring after part 1, where I had a group and we were going out on this trail, and there was a gate on the trail. What is this gate doing on my trail? And one of my clients was talking about giving herself permission. That's kind of what she was thinking about. What does that look like? How does she do that? And lo and behold, there's a gate. What do you do with the gate? Give yourself permission to go around the gate. And so that was kind of a neat metaphor for her. And one more, if that's okay, is what I've come to realize is that nature roaming and personally nature coaching, I think, can happen anywhere. We were talking about bringing nature in. I've also been doing more with people in urban. I'm not in urban, but there is a city here, and there's buildings, and not everybody can get out to the mountains and spend 3 hours at a time. So how can people in their workday take a break and get out into nature and experience the benefits that nature has to offer when they only have half an hour or an hour? And so finding that little piece of nature wherever you are, and taking the time to be in it and be mindful and present. So I did that with a group, and there's still city noises and there's still city smells. So it's kind of like that then becomes part of the experience, which is, again, just kind of how does that impact a person when they're out in that? So it's a lot, I guess.
Wow, how much? Just the examples there. And that's one thing that our listeners really, really benefit from, is hearing other coaches practice. And it's great having those ideas and these theories and how you're going to move it forward in your business, but then actually how do you apply it one-on-one? And we all work privately, unless you're co-coaching, so actually having the opportunity to kind of be that fly on the wall and discover how someone else is really bringing it to life is so valuable. And I was just totally reminded of a kind of a process initiative that I took part in a couple of years back, called Street Wisdom. And it really sounded like there's a lot of association with the process that you're using, particularly around this kind of roaming and how you're now holding the intention more loosely. So, within Street Wisdom, and I've done this a couple of times in the southwest of England, and I understand they're all over the world. It is very much about going into the urban environment and having an intention and really just opening yourself up to what is there, what do you notice. And I was actually back in Frome at the weekend, and I remember where I the urban environment I kind of did this in a few years ago, and there was a clock with no hands. And it was just this kind of image of time. And what does that mean when there is a clock with no time? Is there no time? How do you use time? And it just kind of prompt kind of memories for me. So thank you so much for just kind of sharing that. And it's interesting to see that actually you're now bringing your practice into the urban area. Ultimately, we're a business. We want to serve our clients. If our clients can't get out to the wilderness, how can we bring our service to them? How can we work with the nature that does exist within urban areas? Because it is everywhere. Once you start to look, it's like, boom, wow, it's there. But just taking a slightly different route now, because we understand that since we've spoken as well, you've developed this concept further, you're starting to refine it, and you're also you're qualified with the EQI 2.0 assessment, and this is it's a great certification to have. It's really great to start unpacking emotions, and actually you've been now taking this connection with the emotional space into nature, and it would just to be really interesting to discover, how have you been working with the tool, and what have your clients been experienced? Have they benefited from this?
Yeah, so one of the things that I've started to do is connecting emotional intelligence with being in nature. So how can you further develop emotional intelligence skills through being in nature? And that was one of the reasons why I chose this assessment, and emotional intelligence is kind of a focus. There are a few reasons. One is, it's related to your professional life, your personal life, and so there's kind of this holistic, everything kind of blends together there. But also for me, and I think for a lot of people, there's something about nature that brings out emotion, and being the awe of nature, and just there's a lot of emotion, I think, around it. So I started thinking, what would be a really great kind of pairing, and I decided it was emotional intelligence. So that's where I'm going with that. And to me, there are three key skills that you can work on in particular while in nature. And one is self-awareness. So, and I have more examples for that. One client, and I'll just give you an example because I think it helps to clarify. But first, so the idea behind self-awareness is being aware of, and particularly with emotional intelligence, emotional self-awareness is like when you're in a certain emotional state, recognizing that, and even being able to identify when you're going to get to that state or what triggers that state, and the physical sensations around that state. It says my internet is unstable, so you all nod if you can hear me. I think I might be frozen, and I'm hoping.
No, you're all good. You're all good.
Okay, great. So it's being aware, and so what I've found is when my clients are in nature and they're present, they can sense those feelings almost more clearly than when there's just so much going on in our day-to-day. So for example, and she was nature roaming, and she was just very present, feeling that, that comfort that comes with being outdoors, that relaxation, and that peace, really. And then she didn't notice it right away, but eventually noticed, that to-do list started coming in, and the feeling wasn't as pleasant anymore, right? It was kind of more tense, more just stiff, and almost like removed from what was happening in this beautiful scenery. And when she realized that, she was like, ew, gross, and turns and looks, and there is this tree that is just twisted and curved, and there's nooks and crannies and mushrooms. It was instant, I'm here, right? And so she realized, and in that moment, she felt that shift in emotion. So there was kind of like two big shifts, and one of them was more gradual. She didn't realize it until she was in it, but then that one she could tell right away. And I think that's where I want to help my clients get to. It's like, okay, I can tell the moment that I'm shifting from one emotion to another. So that's one. Empathy is another, and just connecting with something bigger than ourselves, right? I mean, that's kind of part of how do we start appreciating other people's emotions and feelings. Well, first we have to get outside ourselves and start connecting with something bigger than ourselves, and nature is obviously that. Finally, there's another key emotional intelligence skill, which is the stress management. I haven't had a whole lot of opportunities for that, but I know they're coming, which is, the uncertainties around nature and being outdoors, and possibilities, of course. But the only one that I have so far is I had a group, and we were all sitting around and journaling, and they were finished, and we were kind of coming up the trail to gather and share. And one person was finishing her journaling, and as she came up to join us separate, she goes, I look up and there's a bear, like just across the way. Okay. Anyway, I'll get more into that when we're talking about risk, about the risks associated too with outdoor coaching, of course. She was fine. The bear just meandered off, but
that is a brilliant segue into the next section. Honestly, it's funny, isn't it? We all, depending on where we are and where we do our coaching, we all know the risks of the area. I think here at the moment we're in rutting season for the deers, so I wouldn't take anyone up into the mountains because it's dangerous at the moment to do that, or into the woodland. And I guess you have bears. We don't have that problem over here, but we do have some big animals, but maybe not quite so big. But we'll touch on that in just a sec. But I just wanted to go back to that emotion piece because it really resonated again with the research I did last year. And talking to coachees who've had outdoor coaching, and all of them talked about the emotion, and all of them talked about being able to connect with their emotions in a different way, to be able to deal with their emotions differently as well. And it's almost like coming outside within four walls, you're being constrained and being sort of pushed and sort of and made to feel restricted. And as soon as you go outside, all that lifts. And therefore, so does the emotional sort of weight as well. And people talked about having sudden instant emotional responses to things they saw, or things they heard, or even smells. Some of them were talking about, this reminded me, I smelt a flower and it reminded me of something, or I saw a sheep and it reminded me of something, or a robin. They all have quite distinct emotional connections with people. And so it just hearing what you said there, I think the emotional piece is so important. And for you to be able to kind of really bring that in and have that accredited qualification, in the EQ 2.0 assessment, but also just that awareness. I think as outdoor coaches, we need to have that awareness of what emotions might come up, because we might have an emotional response as well. So it's about how we moderate our own emotions as coaches as well in the moment. But going back to the bear, so the next question we were going to ask was about challenges. And you spoke about a couple of challenges that you'd faced up until the point where we spoke to you early on in the year. What other challenges have you faced, overcome in the last 6 months or so? And I guess the bear is probably one of those challenges. But what challenges have you experienced in the last 6 months, which might be different to the challenges you experienced before?
Absolutely. So I had some examples here, because one thing that I've found is pre-walking the area that where we're gonna be.
Oh, Jen, we've lost you a little bit. You might need to repeat yourself.
Environment. So it's right outside of this building. There was a lawn.
Sorry, Jen.
Sure.
Can you hear me?
Okay,
Sorry, we just missed that last bit.
I was going to provide a couple of examples of where I've learned. I might have to turn off my video, maybe. I don't know. Are we good?
Yeah, we're good now. So if you just basically repeat what you just said. So after I ask the question, if you go back to and just repeat from the start of what you were saying, even if you're not on visuals, it'll still be on the audio. So it's just that the audio was just dipping in and out then. But if you just go back to the start, as if I've just asked you the question, and then go straight back in.
Okay. Yeah, so I think the best way to go through challenges is to talk about some that specific examples. What I found is pre-walking or just kind of looking at the space ahead of time is really important. And one example is I took a group out. I was going to take a group out, and it was right outside of an office building where there were bushes and there was grass or trees. And so I walked around the area ahead of time. And I found right next to this bush a yellow jacket nest that, they're I don't know if you have them there, but they're ground bees, and they are very aggressive, and you do not want to be around a yellow jacket nest. So I made sure I marked it. I let everybody know ahead of time, but I can only imagine what would happen if someone had walked by there or gotten too close. So, that really highlighted in my mind the importance of looking and kind of checking it all out ahead of time. Another one is there was the bear, and not that, well, I'm not going to say we're going to avoid all bears, but having the conversation ahead of time about these are some of the things you might encounter. You can't cover it all, of course, and I could talk about a waiver and release forms that kind of list some of that. But the bear, there was another one, and this isn't so much risk as just, it was a challenge. It's something that I've learned. I guess it's a lesson learned for me. So I had picked a hike that I was going to do with a group, and I knew this group and what they were looking for. And so I did this hike because of the location. And it was one I had done before, and it has this great overlook, and I'm like, this is going to be perfect. And I do that hike, and it is about like this for like two miles. What is that? 1.5 kilometers or whatever. I thought, oh, my people are not going to enjoy that. This is not going to be like even a good learning experience. It's a little too challenging. And so I had to change another course, just, with very to turn around. And so I would say one of the challenges is being flexible and changing plans when they need to change, which luckily for me, I'm fine with that. I can rearrange things, not a problem. So while it's a challenge, it's not, hard for me, but just for others who really like to plan and have everything lined up, it's something to be aware of. That plans may need to be changed.
And it's an ongoing kind of learning process, and how can we remain adaptable? And yeah, it definitely sounds as if there's a few more nasties over in America than we have within the UK mountain line, which I'm kind of internally grateful for. I think if I was kind of stumbling over a bear mid-coaching session, yeah, I'm not quite sure where I'd be, heading in the opposite direction quite fast. So one area that when we talked last time, you were very much okay, hold me to account with this, please do ask. So we were going to check in on your progress on the application process for the permits, which every country is different, land access is different, private ownership, national parks, we've got the National Trust in the UK, English heritage sites. Like, as a business, how do you work around that? So yeah, what progress or not have you been able to wade through this? Because I understand it's quite complex.
Yeah, well, sadly, I do not have that permit in hand for the Forest Service. And that's the one that definitely something that I have learned that I really want and feel like I need those permits for the Forest Service. So where I am, this is why, because there is two huge national forests in the mountains not far from here. That's where there are tons of hikes. It's just gorgeous. So to do commercial work, which is, get paid to take people out, I need to have permits. And this big, long forest is divided into ranger districts. And so each ranger district requires a permit, a separate permit. So, that's just on my list. And what happened was, there is a deadline early in the year that covers the rest of the year, and I missed that deadline. So, gonna make the deadline for 2022. But in the meantime, what I've done is found private land where it is okay to take paying clients on, or I'll have my clients on the phone and they'll be on the phone somewhere. So it's, I guess, not really commercial work. And so private land. So I've worked around it in that way so far, but I want to partner with different organizations and take people out into the forest. So we're going to have to get those permits. Mm-hmm. Same for so Park Service is another one. So that's a separate permit. There's a national park not far from here, but I'm sticking with the Forest Service for now.
Mm-hmm. And I think you mentioned it in our first part, but I think it's about knowing what is needed wherever you are. So wherever you are in the world listening to this, it's just about having that forethought and making sure that, and with your legal background as well, just making sure that you are dotting the I's, crossing the T's, and getting it right, so that you don't end up walking somewhere that you're not supposed to and having to sort of rethink on the spot rather than a little bit beforehand. And even in the UK, Scotland and England, we have different rights to roam around the countryside as well. So even small countries like ours with different regions have different rules and regulations as well. So yeah, all of our listeners, we've hopefully got listeners all over the world now. It's about making sure that whatever is legally required for your country or location is the important bit.
Absolutely.
Now, one of the things that you've also been doing over the last 6 months is is taking in the initiative to spread the word about outdoor coaching and about what it is that we all have a passion for. So what exactly have you done, and what initiative have you taken, and what have you done to sort of progress that spreading of the word about this wonderful thing called outdoor coaching?
Sure. So after our earlier talk back in March, I did a panel kind of virtual program with a couple of other people on nature coaching, on outdoor and nature coaching for one of those ICF chapters. We had such interest and so much communication during that presentation that we decided to start a community of practice. And so we have a community of practice. It's ICF DC Metro chapter is where it's housed. And we just had our first presentation last week. And it is the three of us created it, co-created it. It's Russ Watts, myself, and Christiana Frischmuth, who she has been on your program, on your podcast. And so we had our first event, and we had just the range of people who were interested and participating were, very experienced nature coaches to coaches who had never done it before, and they're interested in learning more about it and how it works and what they can do. And so we had, there's a discussion thread. You have to be a member of the chapter, but you don't have to be in DC to be a member. So anybody can join it. And then we have a discussion forum where we're going to put, the recording for our presentations. We're going to put resources, and people can have that interaction between our speaker series. So we're going to have a speaker series approximately monthly, and we're hoping to have you, Alex, sometime on there to talk about your studies and your research rather. And so we'll talk about research of the benefits of nature, and we'll talk about retreats and group coaching in nature. So there's a wide array of things we're going to talk about.
And I'm really looking forward to doing that, actually. I think we've got it booked in for springtime next year, haven't we? So yes, I'm really looking forward to that. So thank you for inviting me along.
Absolutely.
The number of initiatives that just seem to be spawning at the moment across the world is absolutely phenomenal. The last couple of years has really seen the pace increase in the interest in nature, green, outdoor, walk and talk, however you want to label it. There's a thread, an essence of similarity within that. And where we're going to be going in the next 2 years, who knows? Listeners, check out the chapter and dial in more resources. And talking of resources, it would be really helpful if you're able to signpost anything that you've stumbled across in the last few months that has really supported your practice and helped develop it.
Sure. One of the things that topic areas, I guess, that I really like to read about is all the wellness and health and well-being aspects of nature. That's whenever I see something on that, I collect it. I collect it and I can share that. And also just the importance of getting people into nature these days, especially so many people are indoors and they're on screens and, getting out. And then the climate benefits of being, climate mitigation benefits of nature in general, and how critical that is for all of us to, be, what am I trying to say? Conserving land, to invest in nature in more than just getting out into it, but protecting it as well.
Yeah, it's one of the again, we've had other podcast guests who are sort of specialists in those areas, and we love to talk to those people. And we did a podcast with the Environmental Week here in the UK earlier on in the year as well. And it's so important as coaches, especially as outdoor coaches. I guess our inherent love for the outdoors kind of lends itself to have an interest in and a focus on environmentally friendly activities. And we always we talk about how we can as coaches make sure that we have a coaching business and a coaching practice that's environmentally friendly as possible. So there's some really great previous podcasts as well. And if there's anything that you can share with us, we can pop up on the resources page around those specific areas that you've talked about, which are just so important, not just for our clients and our coachees, but also for us as well as and our businesses. And we have such a wonderful world out there that we work in and with. It's important for us to make sure we look after it as well. Definitely.
Absolutely.
So Jen, thank you so much. We're wrapping up for today, and just this, as we said, this style of podcast was a little bit different to our others, so the 2 parts, and hopefully our listeners can really just hear how you have evolved your practice. I mean, you'd already been practicing as a coach and an outdoor coach for a while, and even just in the last 6 months, that the change and the evolution, and the way in which you're thinking, the language, everything is just it's amazing to hear, and for you to be so candid with us and share those thoughts you've had and the changes that you've made. And it will continue to evolve, because our coaching practices evolve on a daily basis, if not weekly. So thank you so much for joining us twice. And
Thank you.
We really hope, and we honestly believe our listeners will absolutely love just hearing about your progress. And especially, we say relatively near the beginning of your coaching practice. We've had some guests who've been doing this for 20 plus years, which is amazing. And it's just really great to hear from somebody who's kind of at the start of that journey. And hopefully, if we're still going in 20 years' time, we get into you again. You never know. But thank you so much. And we're so pleased to hear that you've connected with Christiana as well, and that you guys are working together on the ICF DC chapter. It just makes us very happy to see you guys connecting across the pond from us.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you both for having me and for your podcast. I mean, this is part of growing this community, right? Your podcast is so important to that.
Oh, that's one, and that's we always say, we quite often say that we almost feel a little bit selfish, because we just love everything we do with this, and we learn so much ourselves, and we're just happy that other people can listen in and learn along with us as well. So your podcast will be on our website, www.coaching-outdoors.com, and along with all the resources, so the resources you mentioned in part 1, and if you're able to share with us some resources along those topics that you mentioned just now, we'll pop those all on our resources page as well. So look out for your podcast being released very soon. Thank you very much.
So if you enjoyed what you've heard, like it, share across your network, and subscribe to our YouTube channel and LinkedIn community page, the Coaching Outdoor Podcast. Thanks so much in advance for your support.